Morning world, it's 8 o'clock in the morning, it's the 5th of May 2014 and I'm starting a session which is going to last about 2 weeks, not every day, looking at the influences of the planets from a slightly different perspective. I want to start with Mercury, simply because in the coming week or two we're going to get a chance to see Mercury with the naked eye for perhaps one of only 2 times this year. Mercury is the closest planet to the Sun, which is why it's so rare to see. It's only when it's at its furthest declination from the Sun that we see it for a few days at a time. It is the closest planet, and because it's the closest planet, it goes round the Sun faster than any other planet. It actually spins 3 times on its axis for every 2 revolutions of the Sun. So its day is very, very slow compared to ours. Because Mercury is so close to the Sun and moves so fast, its principle is that of movement. It is Hermes Trismegistus. It is the fast-winged messenger of the gods. Mercury rules all forms of communication, whether it's reading, writing, typing, thinking, texting, emailing, speaking, travelling, socialising. All forms of communication are ruled by Mercury. And yet, what is Mercury? Well, one thing we do know fairly recently about Mercury is that we can now plot back using measurements that have been taken over the last 150 years, and we can actually realise Mercury is shrinking. In the last 100 years, it now appears that Mercury in terms of size has decreased by about 1.5 to 2%, and it is still shrinking. We think this is because it's got a solid iron core. 75% of Mercury is made up of, well, it's not solid, it's liquid, kind of liquid solid iron, very dense, but moves, and as it gets denser, so it contracts, becomes more solid, more stable, but as it does so, the centre of the planet condenses, and thus there's a gap between the centre of the planet and the shadow of the planet. Hence, Mercury goes through a period and a number of different Mercury quakes every year where the planet contracts. The planet shrinks to fit the size of the core, and as a result, the external planetary prominences, such as mountain ranges, valleys, cliffs, become a lot higher, which is why Mercury is becoming more and more jagged as it gets older. It may be, but as Mercury changes, so our concepts of communication change. Certainly, I'm looking at how media and communication has changed just in the last 30 years, 20 years, 10 years, let alone the last 100 years. 100 years ago, we weren't even using, well, just about using Morse code and the telegraph. Now look. So, the idea of Mercury. Mercury does tend to have a more neutral perspective. It doesn't deal with gender or issues of value and worth. Mercury deals with logic and rationality. It is completely neutral. And Mercury governs to a certain extent the sign of Gemini and Virgo. Gemini because of the logical, rational, computational side of its nature, and Virgo because of its capacity for effectiveness, efficiency, and diligence and custom, which is very associated with Mercury. Nevertheless, Mercury is also strong in the sign of Aquarius. It is said to be exalted there because Aquarius is very futuristic, very technological, and Mercury loves these qualities. If you have a strong Mercury in your chart, regardless of sign, you're going to find that words like thought and speech and intellect will play a big part of your life. Obviously, if it's somewhere like Pisces 12th house as opposed to something like Leo 1st house, your communication is going to be very different. But the signs and the houses of the horoscope and the position Mercury is in those signs and houses show the way that your communication develops in the outside world. It's the way you communicate in and with other people and with the outside world. It is not so much about your capacity for communication. Everyone has that. Mercury is not speeding up or slowing down. It's got a fairly stable pace. It has got an eccentric orbit. And that's why I think this viewing session over the coming few weeks is going to be quite good, because it's at its highest and nearest to Earth for a long time. So I do expect some rather interesting pictures of Mercury to come over the coming few weeks. Look at Mercury in your chart. Take out the passion, take out the emotion. Look at it in terms of logic, rationality. How's your communication? Catch you later.